join us in welcoming Dr. John Reimer with a round of applause.
Hi, I'm Dr. John Reimer. As mentioned, I'm a drama teacher here at TEDxSeisen, and I'm here to today radically reframe your understanding of nostalgia and how it plays a role in our present by recalling our pasts. So I want to just start with a simple thought exercise. I'd like you all to take a moment and think about a favorite meal. Now, I'm not talking about your favorite food. I'm talking about a meal that you can remember in the past. Where were you? Who were you with? Or were you by yourself? What was the meal? What were you eating? What about it is nice to remember? Who were you with? What were you eating? Can you remember the taste of the food? Can you remember the smell of the food? Can you recall it now as you think about it? So this ability to both bring our memories of the past and our feelings from that time to the present, and then have feelings about the remembering of that memory and those feelings, is what I and other academics have come to call nostalgia. Now, nostalgia is a term that originally meant literally homesickness, meaning that soldiers on the battlefield would get stricken with this longing, this sickness to go home. And that was the term that was coined to identify what was wrong with them. But over time, nostalgia has come to mean something broader, relating to this combination of memory and past emotion recalled to the present and creating another emotion again. So that is where I come at nostalgia, and nostalgia can be triggered by many different things, right? It can be triggered by not just food, as I asked you to think of in the beginning, but nostalgia can be triggered by lots of things, like, for example, if you think about toys and games, photographs, visual arts, and of course, myself as a drama teacher, the performing arts, theater, film, television, and music. Even now, if I ask you to think of a childhood game or toy or song of yours from when you were little that, when you think about it now, kind of gives you this amused or sentimental feeling, right? It's very easy for us to trigger it, but I want to focus on the subject of food, mainly because food is such an easy trigger for most of us, because we spend so much of our lives eating it and having it in our daily lives. So I want to start by having a personal anecdote. So when I was young, I would say maybe 15, I was having a dinner with my family, and after the dinner, I was at the table with my grandma Reimer, may she rest in peace, and between us sat a chocolate swirl pound cake. And as we sat there, all of a sudden my Nana Reimer, which is what I call her, said, "I'm going to have a slice of pound cake." And now, I love pound cake, but I did not know that my Nana loved pound cake, and she was a notoriously picky eater. So I said, "Nana, you like pound cake?" And she said, "I love pound cake." "I do too," I said, and we excitedly started cutting slices and talking and laughing and eating and talking and laughing and eating until there was no more pound cake left. And of course, the story ends quite amusingly, where my mother walks in and says, "Who ate all the pound cake?" Right? But this story isn't necessarily for the pound cake or for even remembering my grandmother, who I miss very deeply. It is around this idea that even now, when I think of or see in daily life chocolate swirl pound cake, I think of my grandmother, because that memory floods back to me. This food triggers that memory from my mind, and I can be there again. I can see my grandmother where she was sitting in relation to me at the table, where I was, what the pound cake tasted like, and how I felt then, and how I feel now to recall that memory. And that's the power of nostalgia in our lives. We are constantly recalling these past events that happened to us and feeling things in regards to how we felt then. Now, of course, these things can be separated, right? I can recall right now all the events of the day. I woke up, I went into the kitchen, I drank some coffee, I went downstairs, I brushed my teeth, etc., etc. That's not really that dynamic, and eventually I'll probably forget the day-to-day. And emotions happen to us all the time too. Oh, I take a sip of that coffee, I feel good, right? Oh, I stub my toe on the couch, oh, it makes me angry. But again, in a couple of days, that probably won't mean much. But if I have the event happen where I have a memory created with an emotional feeling attached, now all of a sudden, I might be able to recall that later on. Oh my gosh, I tripped at the station, dropped all my things all over the ground, and everyone stood there laughing, and I felt so stupid, right? That's probably going to linger with me better than any of those other memories or those other feelings. It's that combination that makes nostalgia so powerful. So, my doctoral research at the University of California, San Diego focused specifically on nostalgia as used by performing arts, specifically theater, film, and television, and how it is used in order to elicit responses in the audience. In other words, how creators of TV shows and movies and plays are specifically designing what they create to elicit those nostalgic responses in us. And I'll give you my favorite example from Japanese media. This is a poster from the 1985 film Tampopo. Some of you may know it, some of you may not. It is colloquially known as the ramen movie. It's by Juzo Itami, director and writer. And in this film, oh, by the way, it is it's not actually about dandelions, right? The Tampopo is the name of the female protagonist. But in the film, these two truck drivers, Goro and Gun, they are kind of passing through this town and stumble upon Tampopo's ramen shop. And when they go in, they try her ramen, and it's terrible. And so the rest of the film follows them trying to help her improve her life by improving her ramen, by studying the meat, the broth, the noodles, the presentation, right? But what Tampo does even more beautifully in terms of this idea of nostalgia and the use of nostalgia in film is it has these small little disconnected but related to food and eating scenes, or I would call them vignettes. Vignettes around food and eating where it presents this kind of funny or poignant little moment where we as an audience can see different examples of people eating and experiencing food or interacting with food, and it creates a response in us. And I think the most poignant and powerful example of this in the film, and it may get emotional, those of you who know me. In this scene, a father is seen rushing home and opens the door, and we see his wife is on her deathbed, surrounded by their children and the medical staff. And he goes up to her side, and he's beside himself, and he says, you can't die, you haven't made us dinner yet. Get up and cook. And then the wife, slowly and unsteadily, rises from her bed, goes into the kitchen, starts to cook fried rice, brings it out to the kids, and they all begin to eat it, right? Of course, they're like, thank you, we're so grateful. And just as a slow smile comes on her face, she drops dead. And of course, the children begin to cry. But the father says, keep eating. This is the last meal of your mother's you will ever eat. And through their tears, they kept eating the meal. And it cuts back to Gun and Goro. Now, again, this scene is not specifically about fried rice. But what the filmmaker has done is found a way to tap into some of these universally relatable things: mothers and fathers, parents and children, death and dying, and the last time we'll ever experience something, and put it into a scene for us to feel something by watching it happen to someone who's telling us the story. It's phenomenal to me, and that to me really demonstrates the power that nostalgia can have when utilized in something like a film. So I highly recommend you check out Tom Popol as really just an incredible bit of film that taps into nostalgia. But I want to specifically highlight again that this is happening to us all the time in our daily lives. Film and television and other arts and other objects like toys and things, they tap into it for us, they trigger it in us, but we are constantly being shaped by this negotiation in our daily lives between our emotions and our memories and how we feel about those when they get triggered in us. So, and this actually physically affects how we live. And I'll bring you the example of a psychologist out of Harvard, Dr. Ellen Langer, who from the 1970s has been doing experiments, and her experiments have also been recreated, in which she takes, for example, she'll take a population of 80-year-olds. These 80-year-olds she'll split into 3 groups. Her first group is the control group, that they will just continue to live their lives as they always have. The second group, she will say, I want you on the daily to think about yourself 20 years ago. So in other words, when they were in their 60s. That's all she wants them to do. The third group, they will actually be asked to live as if they are 20 years younger, to the degree where their entire houses will be restaged to be as if it was 20 years earlier. But this goes to quite an extent. So for example, if, in their 80s, they're no longer asked to carry a suitcase upstairs or weed their garden. Well, these individuals are expected to do it if they had done it in their 60s. And they did. And what was amazing is, of course, the control group, we didn't really see much change. But in the third group, the group that had to act as if they were younger, what we saw overall was that they stood taller, they were stronger, and they reported feeling significantly younger than they had before the study started. Now, of course, that's amazing, but what's even more amazing and connects us back to nostalgia is that the second group, the group that was only asked to think about themselves 20 years earlier, they also had an increase in their height, their strength, and their feeling younger. So our minds connect directly to our body. When we are nostalgic for our memories and our pasts and how it made us feel, it actually can change who we are in the present. So today I hope I've kind of been able to reframe your understanding of the word nostalgia. And I do hope that now, as you go out into the world, when you have those moments of your nostalgia being triggered, be it from an old toy, or a song, or something you see in a movie, and you see your past and you have a feeling of the feelings you once had, I really encourage you to think about the role that nostalgia plays in your life every day.